My experience in all of this is that the system is even more corrupt than I feared, but the people are even more wonderful than I knew. We're great. That's not the problem. The basic decency of the American people is solid. The problem is that our government, there is a divergence there between the goodness and the decency of the American people and the way our government behaves. Because in a representative democracy, our government should be representing the will or the consciousness of the people. And we all know that's not what's happening. We know that our government does more to represent the will of huge multinational corporate entities who are seeking nothing except to improve their short-term profits. This is a breach. This is a breach not only between the people and our government. This is a breach between our government and democracy itself. So do I feel that the American people hear that? When I speak at events, I absolutely do. And I feel this is a pregnant moment in American democracy where, with the right leadership, Americans are ready to transform all that, to make a fundamental break with the past, to end an aberrational chapter in our history, to begin a new one, and to make a break with the patterns, the economic patterns, the social patterns, and the political patterns that have come to define our country today.
So if government is beholden to this corporate aristocracy and doing their bidding and really causing negative effects for all of us Americans who you're saying typically have it together, shouldn't the argument be then that we really should be reducing the power of government and restricting it so that people can kind of get along and cooperate more voluntarily without
Well, that's the argument if you're a right-wing Republican who's really just trying to leave people out to dry. No, that's not the argument of a conscious conservative or a conscious liberal. That's neither a high-minded liberal nor a high-minded conservative value. The idea is that government is here to be of the people, by the people, and for the people. All government policy, in my opinion, should be based on the idea that it should help make people thrive. That's what all public policy should be. It should be answering the question, what helps people thrive? You can't say to a small child to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. The government should get out of the way and let the kid pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Those children don't even have boots. You're talking about millions of Americans who do all the right thing. They work hard. They work sometimes 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. Meanwhile, the government is certainly not getting out of the way of helping the richest Americans. They're doing their bidding. No, the answer for the person who's working so hard in the richest country in the world, who has to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet, and then they come home at night and they don't have the energy or the bandwidth to be present for their spouse or read their child a bedtime story. No, the answer is not for government to get out of the way. The answer is for government to get busy and take back that massive transfer of wealth that went to 1% of our population and do what it takes to create economic opportunity for those people, 90% of those people who are working so hard and are being so shafted by their own government.
It seems like you're talking about sort of, in the spiritual renewal of America, that needs to be really a broad movement that touches many different parts of people's lives. And, I think that, obviously the labor movement, is something that needs to come back and be, part of people's lives again and helping fight against this corporate aristocracy. Again, I just kind of wonder when we're talking about the state and we're talking about, what government is and the fact that it is coercion and it's do this or...
What do you mean it is coercion? Not every action of the state is coercion.
Well, if you don't do what the state dictates, then you're punished in some way, right? You're taxed or you're...
There are laws. There are traffic laws. I assume you parked your car somewhere when you came here.
Sure.
I wouldn't call the traffic law, the parking law, the parking signs, the traffic signs. I wouldn't call that coercion. That's appropriate rules so that we can all live together.
Sure, but if you don't pay your parking ticket, then you can be arrested and put in a cage.
I think that's a rather blunt and, even if I may say so, a little bit of a crude description. We have traffic laws so that everybody can be safe. And yes, if somebody runs a red light, then they should be held accountable for that, because it's dangerous for them to be on the road thinking they can just cross red lights anytime they want to.
When we talk about there are other kind of institutions that are important in American life, again, like the church, the family, labor organizations. How do you kind of define what the contours of government are?
Well, I think that there is a healthy skepticism. Nobody wants overreach by the government. But the issue is we also don't want overreach by corporate America. And so there is a balance here. I think that whether you're on the left or the right, you should have, and people do have, an appropriate skepticism about overreach by government. But when it comes to helping people, we're living in an era of underreach by government. We're living in an era when government basically is just leaving people on their own. And I believe that the appropriate function of government is what it says in the Declaration of Independence, that God gave inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to all men, and that governments are instituted to secure those rights. If a child goes to elementary school, and as millions do in America, and do not even have the adequate school supplies with which to teach a child to read, then that means if a child cannot learn to read by 8, then the chances of high school graduation are drastically decreased, and the chances of incarceration are drastically increased. So I believe, yes, that it is government's role. If the government is here to secure the right to pursue happiness, that child has no right to pursue happiness that is not getting a decent education and a chance to learn to read by the age of 8, given that we are the richest country in the world. So yes, that to me is an example of government's proper role.